Good evening. This is Miss Cooper. Just wanted to come and give you some additional information about Chapter 4, dealing with the Industrial Revolution. Today you're going to have a document, an outline, very similar to the outline that you had on last week that dealt with Napoleon. So I want you to make sure that you can download this document or keep up with it, be able to see it either on your phone or through your email. If you cannot get the document, please send me an email at tjcooper@jmcss.org, and I'll be sure to get you another outline. But I'm going to kind of go through this just to give you some commentary about what it consists of. So we've got a date here from 1760 to 1851, and we start off with causes, okay, the main causes of the Industrial Revolution. So within this particular category, this is broken down into outlines. So Roman numeral 1 is the causes of the Industrial Revolution. The first point here is population growth. So in the 18th century, there were more reliable food supplies. There was a heavier resistance to disease. And all of these things contributed to population growth throughout Europe. England and Wales experienced particularly rapid population growth. The population growth meant that children accounted for a relatively high proportion of the total population. It also contributed to the migration of people from the countryside to the cities, from Ireland to England, and from Europe to the Americas. The second point is the agricultural revolution. These are all causes of the Industrial Revolution. The agricultural revolution began long before the 18th century, but new food crops, many of them from the Americas, and new forage crops produced more food per acre and allowed farmers to raise more cattle for meat and milk. But at the time, only wealthy landowners could afford to invest in new crops. That's probably going to be a quiz question. These new farming methods, these were all things that were done by these wealthy landowners. The rich landowners, they would fence off or enclose their land to apply new scientific farming methods. And as they did so, they forced their former tenants to become sharecroppers or landless laborers, or to just migrate to cities. If you didn't want to deal with what they had to do or what they asked you to do, then you can go somewhere else. The third part or thing that they consider to be a cause of the Industrial Revolution is trade and inventiveness, or another word would be innovation. Okay, being able to come up with new things to do, new ways of doing things. In most of Europe, increasing demand for goods was met with increasing production in traditional ways through the addition of new craftspeople to existing workshops and through the putting out system. Population growth and increased agricultural productivity were accompanied by a growth in trade and a fascination with technology and innovation. Britain and continental Europe. 18th century Britain had a number of characteristics that help explain its peculiar role in the Industrial Revolution. These characteristics include economic growth, population growth, people who are willing to put new ideas into practice, strong mining and metal industries, the world's largest merchant marine, and a relatively fluid social structure. Britain also had a good water transportation system, a unified market, and a highly developed commercial sector. The economies of continental Europe experienced a similar dynamic expansion in the 18th century, but lack of markets and management skills and the constant warfare from 1789 to 1815 interrupted trade, and it weakened the incentive to invest in new technologies. Industrialization took hold in Europe after 1815, first in Belgium and then in France. European governments played a significant role in fostering industrialization. The second Roman numeral here. So those were some of the causes of the Industrial Revolution: population growth, the agricultural revolution, trade and innovation, and Britain and its expansion throughout continental Europe. Now, the second component here is the technological revolution. Mass production such as pottery. Pottery was either imported or handmade for the aristocracy, the rich people. In either event, ordinary people could not afford it, but the growing taste for tea, cocoa, and coffee created a demand for porcelain that would not spoil the flavors of these beverages. In 1759, a man by the name of Josiah Wedgwood, he opened a pottery business that used division of labor and molds rather than the potter's wheel. A mass-produced high quality, he used this mold to mass produce high quality porcelain at a low cost that made it affordable for everyday use. Josiah Wedgwood. He decided, okay, instead of getting on the wheel and making things individually, we're going to make a mold and we're going to mass produce these items so we can have a lot of them and we can sell them cheaper. Remember, it's all about being able to sell it, make it cheaper and sell it cheaper, because if you can sell it cheaper, more people will want it. But in order for you to make a profit, you have to be able to make it for cheaper than you can sell it. So that may sound kind of confusing, but we'll talk more about that. Mechanization, the cotton industry. There was a strong market for cotton cloth, but the cotton plant did not grow in Europe. Restrictions on the import of cotton cloth led inventors and entrepreneurs to devise cheap mechanical methods for spinning cotton thread and weaving cotton cloth in England. Between the 1760s, a series of inventions revolutionized the spinning of cotton thread. These things are important, these inventors and these people. These included the spinning jenny in 1764, the water frame in 1769, and the mule in 1785. The increased supply of cotton thread and the demand for cotton cloth led to the invention of power looms and other machinery and processes for cotton textile production. Mechanization of cotton textile production led to much greater efficiency and lower prices. Cotton became America's most valuable crop, produced for export to England, and from the 1820s for America's own cotton textile industries. The iron industries is another component, okay, when talking about the technological revolution. The iron industry. Iron had been in use in Eurasia and Africa for thousands of years, but iron production was associated with the deforestation and that increased the price of charcoal and thus reduced the output of iron. Limited wood supplies and the high cost of skilled labor made iron a rare and valuable metal outside China before the 18th century. In the 18th century, a series of inventions, including coke and puddling, made it possible for the British to produce large amounts of cheap iron. Increased production and lower costs led people to use iron for numerous applications, including bridge building and the construction of the Crystal Palace. The idea of interchangeable parts. See, you used to make something and you just made that one thing, just that one way, that's it. Interchangeable parts allowed you to make something, and no matter what went wrong with it, you can go buy a part and it's interchangeable. It's not like, oh, you got to buy the whole thing over. Interchangeable parts. It originated in the 18th century, but it was widely adopted in the firearms, farm equipment, and sewing machine industries in the 19th century. The use of machinery to mass produce consumer goods with identical parts was known as the American System of Manufacturers. The steam engine, another great technological innovation. The steam engine was the most revolutionary invention of the Industrial Revolution. Between 1702 and 1712, Thomas Newcomen developed a crude, inefficient steam engine that was used to pump water out of coal mines. In 1769, James Watt improved the Newcomb engine and began to manufacture engines for sale to manufacturers. Watt's engine provided a source of power that allowed factories to be located where animal, wind, and water power were lacking. Because people used to run their factories through water power. So your factory had to be built near some type of a river or water system. But these new innovations created a situation to where you can put a factory wherever you want to put it. And now you can still run it, you can power it. In the 1780s, the steam engine was used to power riverboats in France and America. In the 1830s, the development of more efficient engines made it possible to build ocean-going steamships. Railroads. After 1800, inventors including Richard Trevithick and George Stephenson built lighter, more powerful high-pressure steam engines and used them to power steam locomotives that soon replaced the horsepower railways. Railway building mania swept Britain from 1825 to 1845 as the major cities and then small towns were linked by a network of railroads. In the United States, railway booms in the 1840s and 1850s linked the country together and opened the Midwest to agricultural development. Now, I'm going to stop it right there so that I won't go on for too long, but there are a few other pages here that deal with the communication over wires, okay? Learning how to do a telegraph. The electric telegraph was very important. The impact of the early industrial revolution with the new industrial cities, rural environments, working conditions, changes in society. Remember the concept of laissez-faire? Well, it comes back and people are criticizing it. There are protests and reforms because workers are responding to harsh working conditions. Then there are some limits outside of the West. Britain has this effect on Egypt. In the early 19th century, Egypt's ruler Muhammad Ali undertook a program of industrialization that was funded by the export of wheat and cotton and protected by high tariffs on imported goods. The prospect of a powerful modern Egypt posed a threat to the British. So you know when people get threatened, they get mad. The limits of industrialization continue on with their effect in India. I want you to read more about the items up under the British effects on India. And then there are the British effects on China. And in conclusion, industrialization was the most important change since the development of agriculture. With increased mechanical technology driving increased production of goods such as iron and cotton, the industrial age caused environmental problems, but it increased stratification of society. With a new and growing middle class, it also generated concern for children working in factories and philosophies relative to the industrial age, such as those of Adam Smith and Jeremy Bentham. Industrialization of Western nations caused a separation between what would be considered wealthy and poor nations. So that is the rundown of your outline. Please make sure you are taking notes, taking 5 things, 7 things, whatever I've asked for in your instructions. Please take those notes and either type them in the chat, or you can write them in an email, or if you are sitting in person, you'll be able to write them on a piece of paper. And make sure I do get a chance to check that off, because I will let you keep that in your folder, but I will need to check off that you actually wrote those facts and were engaged in the class. Thank you. Peace and love until next time.